Hello, and welcome to an Introduction to Artist Resources Toolkit overview for the Individual Artist Awards presented by the Rasmussen Foundation. My name is Enzina Murari.
And I'm Karen Lowell. Together, we'll guide you through the Artist Resources Toolkit that's located on the Rasmussen Foundation's website. This toolkit can provide you with great resources that you're able to apply to any artist opportunity that you intend to pursue, while it focuses on the Individual Artist Awards application cycle and process.
That's right, Karen. And in this presentation, we're going to discuss where to find the Artist Toolkit online, the basics of grants and grant writing for artists, the components of an arts grant application, tips for creating an artist resume and artist statement, what is included in a project narrative, like project plans and proposal, how to think about crafting a budget, tips for presenting your best work samples, how to access cultural content and resources, how to prepare your grant application and specifically your IAA grant application, and finally, some Alaska artist resources that you might find helpful as you develop your artist practice.
So, where is the Artist Toolkit? You can find the Artist Toolkit by visiting www.rasmussen.org and navigate to Find Funding. Let's go to the website together now to locate the Artist Toolkit. Okay, once you're on the website and have selected the Find Funding tab, you'll pull down to find the Individual Artists Awards. From here, as you can see, several tabs will pop up. Select Artist Resources in the middle, and this will take you to a page that has resources organized by topic area. And Zena and I will be going over these in more detail, but we wanted to show you where you can access these resources after this presentation. I'll open just one to show you the layout. Say, I'm curious about how to even start writing my grant for IAA. So let's open How to Write Grants. Here you'll find an overview document that provides an introduction to grant writing for artists and some tips to make your application successful. Each of these sections has an overview document that provides similar guidelines. When we exit this document, you can see there are other helpful tips under each category. For example, an overview for grant writing for Alaska Native artists, the 5 C's of grant writing, and secrets of the grant. I encourage you to go through each document to find the ones that are most helpful to you.
Absolutely, Karen. Now, before we head back to our overview, let's just identify each category here in this resource toolkit that we're going to highlight more in depth momentarily. So next to How to Write Grants, you can see that there is a resume overview and a sample template. So if you haven't started your resume and not sure where to start, you can check here and review all about resumes, but also edit that template online and make it appropriate to your practice. There's also a section on artist statements that provides an overview to what an artist statement is, what to highlight in your statement about your work, and some common things to avoid. On the lower half of the toolkit, you'll find tips for work samples. Now, that guide to work samples is an overarching document that provides information to work samples across any discipline. There's also some information on how to capture really strong visual artwork samples. Next to that, we have cultural content resources. So this is all about how to make your work culturally competent, while also identifying cultural appropriation and creative cultural exchange. And then we have an information sheet for our Alaska artist resources. Now, this is specific to Alaska-based resources, but also national resources that Alaska artists can use. Now, if you scroll to the bottom of this page, you'll see that there's a video library for artists. We encourage you to come back here to this resource toolkit because this is a section that will be continually added upon and will grow. So right now there are a few videos that you can identify. One is a panel discussion on cultural appropriation. So if this is something of interest to you, it might be helpful to gain some of these panelists' perspectives. There's also a recorded IAA overview that provides a general introduction to the Individual Artist Awards program and some perspectives from artists. So here we have IAA recipient Kristen Link that discusses the impact of the project awards in her practice. Now, I do want to bring attention to one document at the top part of this page, and that's the IAA overview and guidelines. So this is a really helpful document that provides guidelines for the Individual Artist Award application and discusses things like career stages and artistic disciplines. And those are two things that Karen and I won't be discussing today. So we do encourage you, if you have questions about what career stage you are or what artistic discipline best represents your work, we encourage you to check out that overview and guidelines document. Okay, so the first topic we want to review is the basics of grant writing for artists. So when you are applying for an artist grant, you are crafting a proposal that clearly explains your artistic project or work and why it deserves funding or support. You know, the primary goal of your grant application is to demonstrate the artistic, the cultural, individual, or the community impact of your work while showcasing your ability to manage and complete the project. Now, to find success in writing a grant application, you want to ensure that you are producing a clear, compelling proposal that demonstrates the significance of your project. You'll hear us talk about that a lot during this presentation. Your ability to complete the proposed project. You want the panelists to feel confident that you can achieve what you are suggesting you want to do in your project, and what the broader impact the project will have on your individual creative practice or your community. Now, it's also important to align your project with the goals of the funder, to manage your budget responsibly, and to present yourself as a capable and professional artist. Always remember that the majority of grants you'll apply for are competitive. So even if you write a stellar grant proposal, you may not receive funding for your project that time. That's why it's always important to remain persistent and keep on applying. We'll discuss this further when we get into the components of an application, but it is important to recognize that every artist grant you apply for is going to be a little bit different, but some basic overarching elements appear in most grant applications or artist opportunities. Those include an introduction and artist background. These are typically your artist resume and statement, an overview of your project through a project description, or sometimes called a narrative of activities, a breakdown of the project costs through a budget, work samples that show examples of your work and help to support the proposed project, a demonstration of your artistic merit and relevance, and then finally, any concluding points that reinforce why you're the right person for this project and how it aligns with where you are at in your artist career at this time.
That is great, and Zena, really helpful information on approaching grant writing as an artist. Next, we're going to dive into the components of an application in a little more detail. In this section, we're going to go over artist resumes, artist statements, narrative statements, which are your project plans and proposal, budgets, and work samples. As a reminder, everything we discuss will be available at rasmussen.org under IAA Artist Resources. So let's start with the basic of artist resumes. First, let's establish the difference between an artist resume and an artist CV. Both are documents that are going to demonstrate a history of your art practice, but they differ in structure and the information conveyed. Some artist opportunities will request a resume, and others will seek a CV, so it's important to know the difference. An artist resume is a document that outlines an artist's professional background, their accomplishments, skills, exhibitions, and other relevant experiences related to their artistic career. It serves to showcase the artist's qualifications to publishers, labels, directors, galleries, curators, grantors, or potential clients. Very much like a traditional resume for any profession, it highlights your work and your accomplishments in a concise, organized manner. An artist's CV, or curriculum vitae, is a comprehensive document that outlines your full professional history, achievements, and credentials. It's like an artist's resume, but typically more detailed and expansive, often extending beyond 1 or 2 pages. An artist's CV is used to showcase an artist's career in a thorough chronological format, highlighting key milestones such as exhibitions, festivals, shows, performances, awards, residencies, education, publications, and other professional activities as an artist. It captures the entirety of your artist career. Now, for the Rasmussen Foundation Individual Artist Awards, please submit an artist resume that is 1 to 2 pages in length. And for some applicants, this may mean highlighting specific background information to include that supports the work that you're proposing. It does not have to be comprehensive. You can edit it down to the last 5 years or the most important and strongest experiences that you have. So some things to include. No one person's going to have the same resume. Everything is highly individualized and specific to an individual's history in your art practice. But some general things to highlight in the resume include your contact information, which might just be your name if you're more comfortable with that. You can include your address and phone number, email address, website if you have one, and your social media handles if that's applicable. You can include information about your own education and training. You can list degrees, certifications, relevant academic achievements, or any kind of mentored activity. You can list mentorships, apprenticeships that you've participated in. You can include the institution's name, the degree type, the graduation date, things like that. You can include information about any kind of public display of your work, like exhibitions, publications, performances, etc. This will list any kind of activity that you've participated in, whether it's a solo or group show. This also will demonstrate your experience in presenting your work to the public. You can include things like honors and awards, any recognition that you've received in relationship to your work. These can be local, national, or international accolades if you've received them. The following is only relevant the following only if it's relevant to your art practice. Things like publications, residencies, collections, if you are a part of, or any kind of teaching experience, if that's applicable. If you teach art or have taught workshops or classes, you can list your teaching experience here. Also, you can list your professional affiliations. It's optional, but you can include that, like art organizations, guilds, galleries, societies, anything that you're a member of as a participant. If there's any other relevant information that helps paint a historical picture of your creative practice, you can include it. But don't include information that isn't relevant to your practice as an artist. For example, if you've worked for 10 years as a commercial fisherman or 5 years in hospitality, but these are not relevant to your creative practice, they don't belong in your artist resume. As you can see, resumes will vary wildly. Just make sure that they are an accurate reflection of your history as an artist. Resumes are another way for the grant panels to learn about who you are and understand how your background can support your project proposal. If you don't have a resume, the Rasmussen Foundation has provided a template that you can personalize. You can find this under the Artist Resources tab at rasmussen.org under that category, Artist Resumes. They can look a lot of different ways, and this is just one example you can follow to present your artist history.
Fabulous, Karen. And along with artist resumes or CVs, an artist statement is an integral part of your artist portfolio. Now, an artist statement is a brief written description of an artist's work. It addresses what kind of work you make, why you make the work, and how you make it. It is meant to describe the broader content of your work over time. Now, the written statement is often used to introduce your work to people, whether those be viewers, listeners, readers, producers, publishers, curators, audiences, collectors, reviewers, or panelists who are interested in your creative practice. The primary goal of an artist statement is to provide insight into what motivates and inspires you. What themes and concepts reoccur in your work, and what techniques, mediums, genres do you use to communicate your ideas? Think about your artist statement as the who, what, why, and how of your artist practice. When considering what to include in your artist statement, reflect on what kind of artwork you create: paintings, jazz music, short films. What concepts, subject matters, or other themes recur in your work? What kinds of artistic processes do you use? What are your methods, your materials, your techniques, and approaches to creating? Where do you find your inspiration? What is driving your work? Is it from personal experience and memory? Is it part of a culture you're connected to? Is it history, nature, society, etc.? Why do you make the artwork? What is the why behind your work? What is the purpose and intention in your practice? What is unique about your process or unique about your subject matter? What will make you as an artist or your application stand out in a sea of applications? And then finally, your artist statement is an opportunity to discuss what your art means to you. This can also be extended to your community. But what is the meaning here? Now, your artist statement is an opportunity to tell your artist story in all of those ways. And in considering how best to communicate your work to a reader, whether that again be a panelist, gallerist, publicist, label, or the like, think about your artist statement as an introduction of your work to people who may not be familiar with you or what you make. Keep your statement short and concise. Typically aim for between 150 to 300 words. And your goal is to convey the essence of your creative practice clearly and succinctly. In this way, avoid jargon and redundancy and keep the focus on your work. Be genuine in your representation of yourself, confident, direct, and personal. As you write your statement, use language you might use every day as if you were talking passionately about your work to another person. The artist statement provides an overarching picture of your practice as an artist. It differs from a statement of work or an exhibition statement where you specifically discuss a specific project, a collection of works, or even one artwork itself. The artist statement is the larger story of who you are as an artist and what inspires and how this informs your work.
Lovely. It's really good information. So in addition to portfolio staples like resumes and statements, most artist opportunities require a project budget. This is not the case all of the time. For instance, the Individual Artist Fellowship Award, there is no budget required, but one is required for the project award. So let's talk about it. Firstly, an artist project budget is a clear, itemized breakdown of the project's financial needs. The budget reflects how much money is required, how it's going to be used, and whether other sources of funding are involved. Typically demonstrates to the review panel that your project is realistic, it's well-planned, and financially viable. So what does a project budget include? It's meant to be comprehensive, and you should be as specific as possible so that the panel or funding body has a good understanding of the financial depth of your project. You're going to want to include your project's expenses or the costs you will incur over the grant period. Examples that you can include in a project budget are things like artist fees. That is your compensation for your work. Always make sure to pay yourself or any other project partner. Materials and supplies, things like paint, fabric, cameras, software, etc., can go towards studio or rehearsal space rental, can go towards equipment rental or the purchase of equipment, travel expenses, if that's applicable to your proposal. It can go towards marketing and promotion, things like a website, any kind of video footage, any editing services, installation or production costs, shipping costs, if those are relevant. You also might want to account for any income you may receive if this is relevant to your project. This might reflect the amount requested from the grant, your personal contribution, either in kind or cash, other kinds of grants or sponsorships, either pending or confirmed, sales or ticket income, if that's part of your project, and any other contributions towards the project, if applicable. Now, not all grants will request an income report, but it's good to be familiar with this format because it's often included in your overall budget breakdown. You want to create a reasonable and logical budget for your proposal. For the IAA project award, your budget must total $10,000, no more, no less. You can include line items like artist fees, supplies, materials, marketing, travel expenses, equipment, all of the things I mentioned previously. And we also encourage you to be specific rather than just put a line item that says materials, which you can do, but we don't recommend it. And with a total of, $10,000 or $1,000, you can list out individual items, things like, quantity, the kind of item, the total cost. You could include shipping costs in this also as part of that. Many panelists are not familiar with the shipping costs in Alaska, so sometimes that's helpful to include. You don't have to include exact amounts. You don't have to go down to the pennies, but I think it's okay to round up and be concrete and specific there. So for the individual artist awards, you don't have to upload a separate budget document. Now there's a new tool in the application where you submit your project costs in the form that's populated in the application. The form will auto-calculate for you, and you are asked to describe the expense and include the amount. Remember, for project awards, all budgets must equal $10,000, so make sure you are accurately reflecting project costs. If you're unsure, you can always reach out to program staff. And for IAA, you do not need to include project income. Make sure to indicate in your narrative, though, if your project exceeds the $10,000 amount and how you intend to fill that gap. Tips for a strong budget. You want to be specific. You want to itemize your costs. Don't just lump everything under materials. Also, do not just include one line item that says artist time. Match the scope of your project. Don't over or under budget. You want to include notes or a budget narrative explaining unusual items or assumptions about your budget. And make sure it balances. You want your income and your expenses to match, unless you're showing a gap that the grant is meant to cover. If your project exceeds that grant amount, indicate how you'll cover that overage.
Fabulous. Now, most grant applications will also request a project timeline that matches the grant period and often aligns with that project budget that Karen was discussing. Both the project award and the fellowship at the Rasmussen Foundation do request a timeline of activities. Now, a project timeline is a clear, organized schedule that outlines the key phases and milestones of your proposed project from start to finish. It demonstrates to the panel that your project is well planned, feasible, and manageable within that grant period. Now, remember, the Individual Artist Awards grant period is 1 year. When thinking about how to develop your timeline, make sure that you are using simple and clear language. Like the budget, you are being specific, but not overly detailed. and that your timeline aligns with your budget and your project goals. Make sure that your timeline reflects achievable goals and activities. You also want to include start and end dates. Identify when the project will begin and when you expect to complete it. Usually, this aligns with the 1-year grant period, but it may not. You might have a project that begins and ends within a 6-month period. That's okay. Just make sure to indicate that in your timeline. Include project deadlines or milestones. Break your project down into tasks with key deadlines and targets. This will help provide some structure to your project and make sure that you are able to achieve some of those goals. Also identify key deliverables or outcomes. Clearly tie those tasks and activities to specific outcomes that will keep you on track. Like by November, you will write 2 new chapters. And always make space for flexible time. Be realistic and show awareness of potential delays and build in a little flexibility here. Life happens, and sometimes our schedule gets interrupted. Just make sure you are accounting for that. Now, each application will have a different format for the timeline. Like a lot of the narrative components, these are highly individualized. You can be loose with your approximation. For example, for a playwriting project that begins in January, you can note that in January, you will begin with a 2-month research phase, where you will research local archives and conduct interviews with community elders. In March, you will start transcribing those interviews and organizing your research. April through August will be dedicated to writing the first draft of a 1-act play. An early draft review is scheduled for September with guest readers. Then in October, you will gather feedback and finalize the draft and begin contacting theater companies. November and December takes you to the end of that year, and that will be dedicated to finalizing project tasks, preparing for next steps, and compiling a final project report. This last piece is essential. All grants that you apply for require a final report of how you use that funding, and this is true to the individual artist awards. Part of your agreement when you receive an individual artist award is that you will submit a final report of how all those funds were expended, and it is required in order to be able to apply again.
Okay, so next we're going to discuss what components you might find in a narrative or written element of an artist grant application. And we'll specifically identify the narrative questions that are included in the IAA Project Award application. The narrative portion of an arts grant application is where you tell the story of your project, your artistic practice, and the significance of this project on your career. It's your opportunity to explain not just what you're doing, but why it matters. So you'll typically find that narrative components of an artist grant fall under specific topics. Usually there's a project description, which is asking you for a clear, concise explanation of your proposed project, what it is, how it's going to be created, and who will be involved. There might be a section on what your artistic vision is. That is, what drives your creative work. This includes your goals, themes, and artistic intentions. The grant narrative section is also designed to assist you in providing context and impact. You'll usually be prompted to identify why the project is important, culturally, socially, or artistically, who it will reach, and how it will make an impact. Often, you'll also be encouraged to reflect on your personal background, to share a bit about you as an artist, your experience, your style, and how this project fits into your larger body of work. Finally, the funder and grant reviewers or panelists want to ensure that the project fits within a grant timeline and is both fiscally and experientially feasible. So, providing a brief outline showing that the project is realistic and that you have a clear plan for completing it with strong and realistic budget. This will help round out this very strong proposal. We encourage you to be specific and avoid vague language. Tailor your narrative to the priorities of the funder. Read the guidelines carefully. Keep it clear and engaging, even if your art is complex or abstract. You want to write to an educated but uninformed audience. The application reviewers are working artists and arts administrators. They are experts in their field, but they do not know you or your work. Be descriptive and paint a holistic picture of you and your art practice. And always remember the 5 C's of grant writing: be clear, concise, consistent, compelling, and complete.
Thank you, Karen. That narrative component is just so hugely important in being able to articulate your project to the panel. In addition to the narrative, to have a strong, well-rounded application, you must also pay really close attention to your work samples. Now, work samples are examples of your arts practice that demonstrate your artistic ability and the quality of your work. Most applications for grants and opportunities require work samples. Work samples are separate from those written components of an application, like the resume, artist statement, project narrative, and budget, in that they allow the selection panelists to see, to hear, or to read your work directly. Together with the narrative, these work samples demonstrate a complete picture of who you are as an artist to the panel. And at times, panelists will go to your work samples first. So it's really important to include your best work and to think about how you're representing your samples as a portfolio of your practice. Some things to keep in mind that when thinking about work samples is that most applications are submitted through a digital platform, and your work samples will be uploaded as digital files or links. Often these are JPEGs, PDFs, MP3s, MP4s, or links to platforms like YouTube or Vimeo. Often there are requirements regarding number of work samples allowed, image sizes and resolutions, time limits, and page counts. And that's all true for the individual artist awards, and we'll get to that in a moment. And you may also be asked to include information about each work sample: title, the year it was created, media used, and a brief work sample description. This is considered metadata. And that work sample description is really key. It's an opportunity to tell more about your artist story to the panel. So we really encourage that you take advantage of that project, that work sample description, to convey that really important information about your work to the panel or reviewers. Now, there are 4 overarching categories for work samples that applicants can choose from. So the work sample formats are no longer tied to specific disciplines. Those 4 types of formats are digital photographs, manuscripts, video, or audio files. The latter 2 I will get to in a moment. Additionally, applicants can select to combine different work samples should they feel that that serves their work and project most appropriately. Now, again, each applicant will select the work sample format for their specific project. While we offer some recommendations, we leave that decision-making up to the applicant. Here you see that we recommend for digital photographs are best applied to static works of art. That might be artists working within 2D and 3D fields. This might apply to visual artists, craft artists, folk and traditional artists, media artists, and sometimes even still images of folks working across performance and theater or production arts. Also, make sure that you are paying attention to approved file types. For instance, in the project award category, JPEGs are preferred over PDFs for visual images. There are also limitations to the number of image samples. For instance, in IAA, you must submit no less than 4 work samples and no more than 6 work samples. Also, collages are not allowed. So do not combine multiple artworks in one collaged image. It's 6 individual or singular artwork samples only. A collage image will be disqualified. You again also want to pay attention to that metadata and include descriptions of those digital images, title, year, and what the work is about. This is again another way to communicate to the panel what your intention is for your project and how these work samples fit and align within your project. Now, manuscripts are recommended typically for literary art disciplines or written artworks. We might suggest that manuscripts or literary samples would be appropriate for literary arts and scripts works, and in some cases, multidiscipline applications. Now, one thing to note here for manuscripts is that the PDF is the preferred file type. There are also limits to page numbers for written work samples. For example, for fiction, creative nonfiction, memoir scripts, and storytelling samples, this is limited to 7 to 15 pages. For poetry, it's between 4 to 8 poems and no longer than 15 pages. And again, we encourage you to include that descriptive information for each file uploaded. Now, for video files, we suggest that these are best suited to artworks that are movement or time-based. And those disciplines might reflect dance and choreography, music and music composition, media arts, performance and theater, production arts, and even some certain folk and traditional arts. Vimeo or YouTube links are preferred, but MP4s are accepted. One note about YouTube or Vimeo, always, always, always make sure that your files are listed as public or unlisted and not password protected or set to private. Now, for the IAA application, there is a limit to the total viewing time for video work samples, and that is no more than 10 minutes and no less than 5 minutes. And you can submit 2 to 4 videos, as long as you're within that 10-minute guideline. And again, include that descriptive information, the title, your medium, and description of the video. Similar to the photo, digital photos, do not submit a reel of several different clips of videos cut together. This doesn't really give the panel a broad idea or a thorough understanding of your video practice. So singular, solitary works. Now, audio samples, we would suggest these are best for artists that reflect sound only, for instance, music or music composition, or even some artists working in performance and theater, like a spoken word artist. MP3s are the preferred format for sound samples, but an artist could also use a site like Vimeo or YouTube. Now, again, there is a limitation here, and similar to video samples, that is 5 to 10 minutes in total listening time, and no more than 4 audio samples and no less than 2. Also, we remind folks again to include that descriptive element, that title, year, medium, and description. Now, this applies to audio, but it applies to all work samples. Always make sure that you are indicating who is doing what if you are submitting work samples that reflect a group or a collaborative sample. So who is taking on the singing, who is taking on the drumming, etc., or if it's a collaborative project. Identify who is doing what so that the panel has a broader understanding of this sample of work and how it fits in with your artist practice and your specific project proposal. Now, as I mentioned, you also have the option to combine work samples across these different formats. And combined work samples are often most appropriate for multidiscipline artists, but may be beneficial for artists working in other disciplines as well. For example, a multidiscipline application for an animated graphic novel with musical accompaniment would include two secondary disciplines. And again, we encourage you to check out that IAA overview and application guidelines document to get more information about the disciplines. But those secondary disciplines might be visual arts and music composition. And the work samples could include 3 illustrations and 5 minutes of corresponding music. Now, these available work sample combinations give a lot of flexibility. Instead of 6 images, someone could submit 3 images and 5 minutes of video and audio, or 3 images and 7 pages of written work, or 5 minutes of video, audio, and 7 pages of written work. So there's a lot of flexibility in how you can present your work to the panel. But if you have any questions about combined work samples or allowed substitutions, please reach out to the foundation staff for support in determining the best approach for submitting work samples. You can book a one-on-one session with foundation staff and support at rasmussen.org by heading over to the Contact Us and booking time with a program officer. You can also email program staff for the Individual Artist Awards at arts@rasmussen.org.
Some things to consider as you wind things up. Start early. Start now. If you haven't started yet, start now. There's plenty of time for rough drafting. You don't want to wait until the day of the deadline to upload your materials, and you don't want to miss the deadline because of an increase in web traffic or some kind of technical glitch. And it happens every year. So don't wait until the last minute. You want to follow your guidelines, carefully read the grant application instructions to ensure you meet all requirements. We recommend logging into the portal and just even looking at the application to see what it looks like to know what you need. You want to be clear, concise, consistent, compelling, and complete. Avoid jargon, be straightforward about your goals, your methods, and your needs. You want to communicate why this is the right time for you to undertake this project, what it means to you, how it's going to shape your art practice, and why it's important. Thoroughly review your application packet to ensure it's thorough and complete. Proofread it. Ensure that it's well written, it's free from errors. Save your application often as you're uploading things to avoid any glitches in the system or tech issues with your devices. Just make sure to keep saving. There's nothing more heartbreaking than working on something, not saving, and then it disappears. Get feedback. Find a reader or two who can review your application materials before you submit it for clarity and impact. We recommend, asking a friend who knows about your work and then somebody who doesn't, just to get a sense of how you're communicating.
Thanks, Karen. Really, really helpful information here that can be applied not just to IAA, but to lots of other grants and opportunities that an artist might be interested in pursuing. So before we close out this presentation, we also want to draw your attention to a great resource that is included on the Rasmussen Foundation's Artist Resources webpage. That's the Alaska Artist Resources information sheet. Now, there are several organizations that are local, statewide, regional, and national whose mission it is to support artists and to support artists in Alaska through grants and funding, exhibitions, presentation opportunities, community building, technical support, feedback, and advocacy for the creative sector. The Rasmussen Foundation has compiled a list on the webpage that can be found by going to rasmussen.org, navigating to the Artist Resources Toolkit from Individual Artist Awards, and from there, selecting Alaska Artist Resources. Now, while this list is not comprehensive, it does provide a great overview of resources in the state of Alaska and nationally. We encourage you to download this information sheet and use it as you search for other opportunities to advance your creative practice and really to build your creative portfolio. You'll find a variety of state and local arts organizations, regional and national arts organizations, private foundations, artist toolkits, and resources that are easily accessible. We want to keep this list growing. So if you know of an organization or funder that's not included on this list, please shoot us an email at at rasmussen.org. And with that, we've come to the end of our presentation. We are just so grateful you took the time to join us and learn about some of the great resources available at rasmussen.org.
Yes, absolutely check out the Artist Toolkit online and make sure to check back periodically as it continues to grow. We also want to reiterate that we are here to support you as makers. Please book a one-on-one appointment with IAA staff by visiting rasmussen.org and navigating to the Contact Us tab, where you can book an appointment with the program officer and support staff. The website is here on the screen, but you can also find it right on the website. And if you're having any trouble at all, email us at arts@rasmussen.org.
Thanks, Karen. And thanks again, everyone. Keep creating.
We wish you the best of luck as you work on your IAA grant application and any other opportunity that comes your way. And we hope you have a wonderful day.